Have you ever heard of cognitive biases? They're these unconscious patterns of thought that can often lead us to mistakes. After watching this video, you'll probably be able to recognize some of these patterns and understand how human brain is not as perfect as one might think. So let's dive into the intriguing topic of cognitive biases and discover how they impact our daily lives. Cognitive biases are systematic patterns of deviation from norm or rationality in judgment. Despite our best intentions, our minds are not as rational as we believe them to be. Cognitive biases can and will seriously cloud our judgment and influence our decision-making process. I mean, don't get me wrong, they actually exist to make our lives easier. Cognitive biases are like mental shortcuts that our brain take to make sense of the overwhelming amount of information we encounter daily. They help us process information quickly, but the downside is that they can also lead us to make errors in our judgment. Keep in mind that cognitive biases are not the same as logical fallacies. Cognitive biases are rooted in the way the brain actually works, whereas logical fallacies are errors in argument. Learners can be trained to avoid logical fallacies, but cognitive biases are trickier. While there is no easy fix for overcoming these biases, we can increase our understanding of the mistakes we make and why we make them. So, how many of them are there? According to the Cognitive Bias Codex by John Manoogian, there are about 180 known cognitive biases, and we are going to talk about 13 of these biases today. The first cognitive bias that we're going to introduce in this video is called the decoy effect. Decoy effect is a phenomenon in which people will have a specific change in preference between two options when they're presented with a third option. In other words, when deciding between two options, an unattractive third option can change the perceived preference between the other two. Imagine you're buying coffee. If you're presented with only two options, a small cup and a large cup, which are priced $2 and $8, you'll probably go for the small cup because it's a good deal. But when there's another option presented, for example a medium cup priced like $6, the small cup is still okay, but compared to the medium cup, which is the decoy, now the large cup seems like a good deal. Take a moment and think about how many times marketing departments of companies have tricked us using the decoy effect. Now number 2, gambler's fallacy. The gambler's fallacy, or the Monte Carlo fallacy, is the belief that if an event has occurred more frequently than expected, it is less likely to happen again in the future, and vice versa. This is mostly associated with gambling. Let me demonstrate what we mean by this. Imagine you've tossed a coin 9 times and each time it came up heads. When you're tossing the coin for the 10th time, you believe that it's more probable for it to come up tails, because the chances of a coin coming up heads 10 times in a row is ridiculously low. But that's wrong. Chances of heads or tails are still 50-50. It's not more likely to come up tails for the 10th time, and that's a fact. The third cognitive bias we're going to talk about is called the frequency illusion. The frequency illusion, also known as the Baader-Meinhof phenomenon, is a cognitive bias in which a person notices a specific concept, word, or product more frequently after recently becoming aware of it. Everyone has experienced this at least once. You recently considered buying something, for example, a specific model of car, and you notice that you start to see that a specific car like everywhere you go. That's one example of the frequency illusion. Well-traveled road effect is the next cognitive bias. The well-traveled road effect makes traveling on familiar routes seem longer and traveling familiar routes seem shorter. The drive to school on the first day of your freshman year felt longer because it was unfamiliar, while the drive to school on the first day of your senior year felt shorter because it was familiar. When you've gone for a picnic outside the city, the way back home seems shorter than the way you took to the picnic, doesn't it? Number 5. Another interesting cognitive bias is the bandwagon effect. It is a psychological phenomenon where people adopt certain behaviors, styles, or attitudes simply because others are doing so. Here is some examples. When everyone seems to adopt a particular diet, people become more likely to try it themselves. People are more likely to vote for the candidate they think is winning. Fashion trends seem to be particularly vulnerable to the bandwagon effect. Euphoric recall is a cognitive bias that describes the tendency of people to remember past experiences in a positive light, while overlooking negative experiences associated with some events. It's simply remembering the good things about something and forgetting the bad stuff after a while. It's related to the next cognitive bias, number 7, the fading effect bias, a phenomenon in which memories associated with negative emotions tend to be forgotten more quickly than those associated with positive emotions. Keep in mind that it refers to feelings one has associated with their memories and not the content of the memories themselves. This one's very interesting, the cheerleader effect. It's a cognitive bias which causes people to perceive individuals attractive in a group than when seen alone. The phrase was coined by the fictional character Barney Stinson in an episode of the series How I Met Your Mother. Barney points out to his friends a group of women that initially seem attractive, but who are all unattractive when examined individually. Since then, researches have been done and papers have been published about this phenomenon, proving Barney's theory. Number 9. Confirmation bias. It is the tendency to unintentionally search for information in a way that confirms or supports one's prior beliefs or values. This bias is more noticeable now that everyone can Google everything and find that piece of information which supports their belief. Imposter syndrome. Those who struggle with this cognitive bias may doubt their skills, talents, or accomplishments. They always face an internalized fear of being exposed as frauds. Despite external evidence of their abilities, those experiencing this phenomenon do not believe they deserve their success or luck. It can even get more challenging because people with this mindset often do not seek help for their issues because they see their problems as not worthy of psychiatric attention. Have you ever felt like an imposter? Number 11. This one's my personal favorite, rhyme as reason effect. The rhyme as reason effect, also known as Eaton-Rosen phenomenon, is a cognitive bias that leads us to believe that rhyming statements are more accurate or truthful than non-rhyming statements. This is because rhyming increases the aesthetic, fluency, and familiarity of a statement, making it easier to process and remember. If you think about it, even some companies are using this in their ads and slogans. Here are some examples. A friend in need is a friend indeed. An apple a day keeps the doctor away. Next one is the illusory truth effect. The illusory truth effect is the tendency to believe false information to be correct after repeated exposure. The illusory truth effect plays a significant role in fields such as advertising, news, social media, and political propaganda. I'm gonna leave the rest to you on this one. Number 13, the last but not least, we have the bias blind spot. It is the cognitive bias of recognizing the impact of biases on the judgment of others while failing to see the impact of biases on one's own judgment. Can you believe this? In conclusion, it's evident that cognitive biases are an integral part of our thinking process. Understanding them might allow us to navigate through life with greater clarity and objectivity. Thank you for watching. Have a good day.